As a quilter, it is necessary to have your cuts of your fabric accurate and precise. I will show you different types of rulers, what they are used for, and how a ruler can make your project easier to work on. One of the hardest things to do in making a quilt or any project is cutting the fabrics. To make sure your cuts are accurate, you first need to have a sharp rotary cutter. If the cuts are not clean and there are areas of fabric that are not cut, you will need to change the blade on the rotary cutter. There are different sizes of blades. Make sure you use the correct size. 28mm is the small one. The one I use most is the 45mm. For larger projects, it's a 60mm. The blade in this cutter is a little dull, and I'm going to show you what it looks like when you cut. You can see how it doesn't cut all the way through. This is when you need to change your blade. I have a new blade in this cutter. And you can see how smooth that is. Remember, when using these blades, always close them and lock them. You don't want anybody to cut their hands by grabbing it. You want to have a cutting mat that is large enough for your fabric and your cutting needs. If you're lucky enough to have space for this large one that I have back here, which is 34 inches by 60 inches, that's great. Otherwise, you can get some things that rotate around like this for your smaller projects. There are several straight edge rulers to choose from. This is 1 by 12.5 inches, 2.5 by 12.5 inch. This is 3 by 18 inches. You have one like this that is a 6.5 by 12.5 inch. And this is probably my favorite ruler. This is 18.5 by 8.5 inches. I use this 1 by 12 inch ruler to measure the center so I can put the snap on these wallets. I'll also use it for the edge of the bag to measure where I put my straps on it. The small ones are easy for that. This creative grid, 2.5 by 12.5 inch, is good for sashing, along with this omni grid, which is for 3 inches and 18 inches. So you can lay your ruler right on top and make a 3-inch sashing. Or you can make a 2.5-inch sashing. These are great rulers for that. This creative grid's 4.5 by 12.5 inch non-skid discs on the back of it, so it will help your fabric stay in place. The same thing with this 6.5 by 12.5 ruler. It also has the non-skid discs on the back. When you are laying your hands on the ruler, your hands sometimes will move it slightly, so these grips really help. As I said before, this is probably my favorite ruler. It is 8.5 inches by 18.5 inches. It also has lines for your 60-degree and 45-degree angles. It's large enough so you can put your hand on it and cut your fabric without it moving around. These omni grids also have all these little discs on the back. These next two rulers have a lip on it. It holds on to the edge of the cutting mat. This edge keeps the ruler straight, especially when cutting long pieces of fabric. This is the Olipha lip ruler by Olfa, and this is the Omni Edge by Omni Grid. The Omni Grid one has a removable lip here. You will find your favorite straight edge ruler and you'll go to it all the time. You may use a few of these other rulers. Whenever you're finished with the block, you want to square it up. This is a little bit jagged because you can see the edges around here. I'm using the Easy Square Junior. Now this is 6.5 inches by 6.5 inches, but I'm going to square it up to 6 inches. So I'm going to find my 6-inch mark, or at least part of it. Make sure my lines are pretty straight. Take my cutter, pull it apart. Now I'm going to rotate this around and find the 6-inch on this side Now you have your block that is squared up using the Easy Junior Square. These two square up rulers are from Quilt in a Day. They have angles that are squares, and they'll tell you if this is like a 6-inch square, you're going to lay it in here. If you've got a 11-inch square, you can lay it here. This is 12.5 inches, and this is 9.5 inches. If I were going to make my 6-inch square using this Quilt in a Day ruler, I would find my 6 inches and see that there's extra fabric on each side. Then I take my rotary cutter, open it up, go straight off one side and then the other side. So you're making an L. Then I would turn this around for the other two sides. Get this on my 6-inch. I have the 6-inch here and the 6-inch here. And then I would take my rotary cutter, cut it off on one side, and then finish trimming on the last side. This is a great ruler for squaring up a lot of different sizes. These are some specialty rulers. The Shape Cut by June Taylor lets you cut multiple strips without moving the ruler. They are cuts in 1/2 inch increments. So if you're cutting 2-inch strips, you can lay the fabric underneath it, trim off what the 0 is, and then cut your increments of 2, 4, 6, 8, 0. And I'm going to go to the 2 and the 4, 6, 8, 10, and then the 12. After you have cut the strips, remove the form and you can see you have all these 2-inch strips. Everyone has t-shirts and they've been collecting them from every school, sport, concert, and more. To make a t-shirt quilt, this t-shirt transformation by June Taylor makes cutting those t-shirts much easier than if you try to measure them separately. The ruler measurement is 15.5, so you can lay this on a t-shirt and cut the large designs. It also has a 12.5 and a 10.5. After you have cut off the sleeves and prepped it with a backing such as this Easy T Stablizer, place it underneath the t-shirt transformation. You want to center your design and see where the best part of it will be. And on this one, I see it's the 12.5 inch marking. It will get all my design in without cutting off anything else. There's little slots. You're going to take a marker and you're going to mark all around here. Draw the lines. Remove the transformation and then take your straight edge ruler, use those lines as a guide and just make straight cuts. You would prepare all your t-shirts ahead of time before sewing them together. The 60-degree triangle ruler, this one is by Creative Grids and this is by Simplicity. This is a 5.5 inch ruler where this is a 12-inch ruler. I have used this ruler in both the Hexagon table topper and the Santa Claus tree skirt to get the perfect 60-degree angle. You can watch these videos on my channel to see how to make the tree skirt and the Hexagon table topper. These are Fussy Cut Rulers by Quilt in a Day. They come in a 3.5 inch, a 4.5 inch, and a 6.5 inch. These are used when you want to have a certain design from your fabric as a center square or a cornerstone for your quilt. Lay the fabric underneath the size square that you want to cut out. I'm using this little dog here. Using your rotary cutter, cut around the design. You either have the center of a block or a cornerstone. The Strip Tube Ruler by Cozy Quilt Designs will cut triangles from fabric strips made into tubes. I have 2 strips and a solid piece here. I'm going to sew the 2 smaller strips together and then I'm going to sew it to this second side. I have placed the line where I stitched on both the top and the bottom to make a tube. Now I'm going to lay this ruler over it. I trimmed off this side because I don't need it. Line up where the stitching is and use your rotary cutter to cut off. Now reverse that ruler and place the tip on this side where the stitching is. Reverse the ruler again and go all the way through to the end, just using the tip where the stitches are. When you get done, it was a tube, and now you have a block. Press the seams towards the dark, and then sew these together. These little rulers are 1/2 inch wide and they have a 1/4 inch line right in the middle. This is when you're trying to make a half square triangle. You're going to lay the middle of your ruler from edge to edge. Take a marker, mark all the way down on both sides. Then take this to the sewing machine and sew both sides. I have sewn down the 2 lines. Now I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to find the 1/4 inch and I'm going to cut between the 2. This is a block lock square up ruler. It has on the back side groove right here. This groove on the back side locks in the seam. So when you are laying it on, you can see it can move. Then you decide where you want to trim up. You want a 6 inch, it will be right here. You want it to be a 5.5 inch. Here's my 5.5 inch this way. And I'm just going to trim it off. Get those dog ears off. Turn it around, lay the ruler on the side here. Again, it won't move. Set it up for that 5.5 inch. Trim off the edge here. Cut off your dog ears. The 2.5 inch Wonky ruler is used for special projects. It could also be called a twisted log cabin. On this block, you can see that the strips are a little bit uneven or they're wonky. They're not the usual 2.5 strips once you've used this ruler. On this one, it's more like a log cabin where you've got your lights going on this side and you have your darks going this way. To use this ruler, you're going to make a square which is 2.5 inches, add the square to another 2.5 inch square, combine it with a rectangle that is the same size, and then you're going to make a square that is 6.5 inches. Place the ruler so that the center square is right here. It's off to an angle. Then you have your numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to take your rotary cutter, starting with 1, and you're going to cut, and you're going to cut this side also. Once you have those 2 taken away, you're going to switch your fabric around and you're going to have your square right here. There's a front and a back to this, so I'm using the front. You always want to use the same direction. So I'm going to line up my square, take my rotary cutter and go to number 1. Do the same thing on this side. Now you're going to add your next pieces to each side, and then you will cut on the 2s, and then you'll cut the 3s, and then the 4s. So when you look at this, you have your center square, and you're going to add a 2.5 inch strip to this side, and a 2.5 inch strip to that side, and then another 2.5 inch, and a 2.5 inch, and then you're going to take your ruler and center your square here, and then you're going to cut where the 2 is. And you continue that all the way through the full block. Again, this is a specialty ruler. I found this ruler and cutting system at a quilt show. It is by Fiskars. It has a 6.5 inch width, but the blade is in the top, and it will cut the whole width of your fabric when it's folded. So I've got it set up at 3 inches. The blade is in here. You press down, and you've got your cuts. The blade seems to last longer because it's not touching the ruler. This is very similar to the paper cutter, but it is longer. I I hope this will help you when you decide to purchase your next ruler for your project. These rulers can be pricey. Some rulers are made to work for only certain projects, so you want to see if there are different projects you can use with these rulers. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. A day without sunshine is just an extra day for crafting.